Hello and welcome to Wild and Untamed with me, your host, Lara Raybone. In this week's episode, we have the incredible, the delectable Kayleen Mesa, who is a self-love and feminine embodiment coach who dedicates her time to supporting women to cultivate a foundation rooted in deep self-worth, unconditional love, and personal connection. In this episode, we dive into all things healing through vulnerability with open hearts, navigating triggers with other women, and healing the sisterhood wound. We dive into self-intimacy and what doing the work actually is and how it supports us in navigating all kinds of relationships, from romantic to friendships. We also go into how to embrace your too muchness. If you've ever been called the woman who is too much, this is the episode for you. We want to invite you into reclaiming your radiance. We also go into how to cultivate a supportive inner masculine and also opening into liberation through celebration of self, celebration of your sisters, celebration to raise the consciousness of this planet. I can't wait for you to experience this, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. Kayleen. Oh my gosh. Hi. Hi, hi,
Hello.
hi. Thank you so much for being here. I am so freaking excited for everything that is about to unfold whenever we drop in. It's always so potent and so much magic, and I'm just so grateful that you are here.
My love. Likewise, likewise. I've been looking forward for this episode. You and I have been talking about recording something together for a while, and it's finally here. And I am so excited to co-create with you and bringing the good stuff to everyone tuning in. I'm so happy to be here.
So, just to give you guys a little bit of a background, Kayleen and I have known each other. We've been friends for the last 2 years, and we've been in each other's fields for maybe the last 4 years. And we really dropped in and connected when we found out that we were both taking the incredible Vita certification with the queen that is Layla Martin. And as soon as we figured out that we were both on the same course, we were like, hi. And it kind of unfolded from there, but it was really interesting. Like when we first connected and we dropped in on a Zoom call just to because we'd just been on the Instagram, like circling each other's fields,
Yes.
and then we had our call and we shared our stories and our journeys and like dropped all the way into sharing our deepest wounds and our journeys. And we basically figured out that we're the same person. But we have Kayleen is the Colombian version of me, and I'm the English version of Kayleen.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, a couple of, like differences and like unique pieces, of course, as we're all multifaceted, multidimensional beings. But it was really mind-blowing, actually, the similarities that we had in our journeys and what led us into this work. And it was really healing. And I think that that's one of the big pieces that we're going to drop into today is actually the healing that has occurred through our relationship and our friendship, because it was a trigger fest at the beginning, wasn't
Oh, yeah.
it?
Absolutely. I love this conversation so much, my love. It's so beautiful that you're bringing this to all of us, truly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, just to follow from what you just said, and it was so interesting because it was literally our first call, and then we were like like we just connected, and the most beautiful thing is that we connected through opening our vulnerable hearts,
Hmm.
and we just opened and shared all of these fears, all of our insecurities, all of our triggers around like when we first saw each other in our embodiment, in
Hmm.
our power. And it was just so beautiful because I really don't think I've had that kind of experience before with any other woman.
Yeah.
And so from there, just like then coming together into our certification with Layla, and see how we've been expanding from like the first conversation we had, then like fast forward, here we are, and just like the beauty of like seeing each other, always like serving each other as this beautiful mirror of just like the most beautiful expansion, has been so profound and so healing in so many ways.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And every time we connect, and what I just really want to presence as well is the power of having another woman who's willing to meet you in your vulnerability. And that's really that sweet spot that we've found for connection and for actually dissolving all of the sisterhood wounds that were really rife, right? Like I was in the modeling industry and pitted against other women, and that's kind of part of my story. But I would love for you to share just like a little bit about the sisterhood wound for you and how that, because I really want to highlight what a big deal this is for both of us. Like, and with all of the conditioning and all of the pieces that we've both moved through, actually to drop in with a stranger who triggered the fuck out of each other, to then really on the first call drop in with so much vulnerability and heart.
Mm, yes. Also, just to add to that, I feel like that also speaks a lot into the courage that exists within everyone to say yes, to open to that vulnerability. Just wanted to add to that, because
Mm,
yes, it does feel like a very courageous step to say, okay, I'm gonna open with this person just because I know this is for my greater healing.
yeah.
This is for greater expansion. So that's a really big piece that I think I keep finding over and over, right? Because as part of our human journey, it's something that we will keep experiencing, this invitation to open our vulnerable heart over and over again.
Yeah.
um
Because it can be
yes.
scary as fuck.
Oh my god, like
Like
really, really,
trembling.
really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it happens with
And no, I was
you were
going to
gonna say.
say, like, no matter how much work you do, it still gets scary and edgy. Like, you meet new edges and you meet new boundaries or like parameters of your courage. And then it's that instant moment of presence and invitation into claiming what it is that you
Yes.
really desire and moving from that space.
Yes, and it happens in literally every single area of our lives. Like it happens in our work, it happens when in our relationships, it happens in the ways we relate to our sexuality, right? Like it happens in all of these different areas of our lives, and it's so beautiful because then it's always an invitation to keep cultivating that beautiful intimacy and that deeper connection to our hearts and to the world, in so many ways. But
Yes.
um to answer your question about like how the sister wound really started to like unfold for me, and of
Mm-hmm.
course at that time I was completely unconscious this was a thing. I was so disconnected, in so many ways from myself, that I didn't even know this was the thing. But essentially I grew up in Medellin, Colombia. I grew up in this beautiful space. Yet it was a very challenging space for me to just like navigate growing up. I never really felt like there was a space for me to be all of me. I felt like I
Mm-hmm.
always needed to put myself in these like boxes. Like I couldn't be too witchy or too sexual or too silly or too extroverted. Like I always needed to kind of like tone myself down, because I felt like there was always something to be criticized and to be judged for and to be rejected for. And I was rejected many times. I was criticized many times. I was slut shamed many times. And unfortunately, this was many times from other sisters, from other women.
Mm,
And I say unfortunately, yet I don't blame us. I don't blame them. I don't blame myself, because
yeah.
I've done it too in the past. Yeah. And you know what? I feel like the more I've been going deep into my own work, I keep realizing like the amount of conditioning that we are constantly receiving from the media, that that we need to meet these crazy and unrealistic standards and expectations around like how we should look and be in order to be successful of any kind of abundance in our lives. And so if we don't meet those standards and those expectations, we start comparing to the other sisters, to the other women that maybe have those things that we don't. um but I don't know, like I just keep finding that the more we start to ground ourselves in like what it is that it's my unique flavor in the world, and we start connecting with our sisters from that space of like, I see myself in you in so many ways, and really showering our sisters in all the love and all the celebration, and in the moments that we feel triggered by other sister, really have also that sovereignty and that self responsibility to come into our space and say, I'm going to sit with this, and I'm going to become intimate with this part of this, and I'm going to let myself be vulnerable with myself first and foremost, so that I can
Mhm.
truly open to the love that it's available to me. And I find that there's just so much healing in that.
Yeah. And I love that you spoke into the importance of getting intimate with yourself first. Because so often we can, especially if we're feeling triggered or activated by another woman's expression, we can often project onto them, right? Project all of our insecurities and all of these pieces. And if it's a close friend, right, you could even in the unconscious days bring it to them without
Yeah.
getting intimate with those pieces that you're holding, that you're keeping alive within you, right? The stories that we tell ourselves due to all of this conditioning that we receive. And so I really love that you shared about this self intimacy first, and
Mhm.
then having that sovereignty to bring it to the other person if necessary, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
always necessary to bring it to the other person. Because sometimes when you get intimate with yourself, you're like, oh, okay, this is all my shit. And I
Yep.
can fully own it. I can take responsibility, and you get to dissolve it real time. Sometimes it is something that you want to presence and bring to a sister. So I'm curious as to whether you have any just advice for anybody who may be listening about like bringing things to a sister to dissolve.
Yes. Oh, beautiful question, and like just beautiful conversation overall. Something that I've learned to really cultivate, it's really tuning in with what feels safe to me. And
Mhm.
also really identifying, okay, is this person also prepared emotionally, energetically, to have these type of conversations without feeling like completely out of space or triggered, or like it's going to get even worse, right? And like I feel the kind of relationships that I've started to cultivate in my life, and bless every single one of these beings. It's people that have been really devoted to doing their inner work, to really finding what's underneath the jealousy, what's underneath all of these triggers.
Mhm.
And it's so beautiful because then this person is coming into that space with their heart open, and that just creates a sense of safety
Mhm.
within yourself to be willing to open, because also it's like we also need to learn to identify and assess, like, if the container and if this other person is ready to hold this kind of spaces as well.
Yeah.
And because it's like we can also cause harm, and we can also get even more confused when we come and like we throw all of this stuff in someone that's maybe not necessarily prepared for that kind of stuff. And not being prepared, it's cool too. I was not prepared for many years to listen to maybe constructive criticism, or to listen to when another person is feeling like I made them feel in a certain way, and I would immediately take that like really personal. I was like, "Oh my god, like wow, like this person like really has something against me," and I would make it all about me.
Mhm.
And I think it's really beautiful that we start cultivating like the becoming the witness of our experiences. Like, can I step outside of this experience and observe what's happening? And can I like really like feel into this from this space of I just really want to know, and I want to identify and become intimate to this thing that's deeper, that's underneath all of this. So I think safety, it's a really big one, and really knowing what kind of relationships are open to these kind of spaces.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really interesting just from my own experience as well. As I've grown and evolved in my methods of communication and my self-intimacy has developed, there are certain friends that I've leaned into this new shape of communication with, and it's actually caused conflict, and then it's dissolved a piece of the friendship. So
Yep.
it's really important, and you learn it, this discernment as well. And I think it's really something that you touched upon is getting really deep into it, and that safety that is created through that self intimacy that enables you to drop into the core, to the core essence and the core wound, right? Or the core vulnerability of your heart. Because if we're communicating, say, a jealousy piece from a layer that hasn't been recognized or excavated, it
Hmm.
may cause a distortion in the transmission or communication in the vibrational frequency when you bring it to that sister. Whereas if you can really get intimate with the multiple layers that often have been created around that core wound and that core vulnerability, that is the superpower, and that's the ability to drop into communicating from the depths of your heart. So rather than like, oh, this, I'm feeling jealous of this, it's not saying, oh, I'm jealous that you just got this promotion. It's dropping into, okay, what's the core of this wound? Oh, I actually haven't been showing up for myself in terms of
Mm.
my work, and I haven't been fully showing up in these pieces. And I just really wanted to drop into that and share that, because seeing you in that space sparked this jealousy. But actually, I recognize that I haven't been showing up for myself. And I just really want to thank you for showing up in your authenticity and for shining your light,
Mm.
because it's reflected back to me where I'm not showing up for myself.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And I mean, hearing that, it's like that's pure alchemy, right? Like that's how we alchemize pain and suffering, because at the end of the day, like feeling all of these unprocessed things just creates so much inner suffering within ourselves. And like the core of who we are is that we are love, right? And we want to be able to be an extension of this love in everything that we do in our lives, through our relationships, through our work, through our expression, through the ways we show up for ourselves in the world. And so I really love what you said, because it really comes down to taking radical responsibility for ourselves over and over again. And, this works, yes, with our sisters, but also in relationships in general, like
Yeah.
in our romantic relationships and in our relationships in general. And we will keep encountering, like we will find a lot of moments like that we're going to feel triggered, and that we're going to feel activated in some shape or form. But it's so beautiful when, again, we can come back into our spaces, our safe spaces, with our people, with our sisters, brothers and sisters, and just be like, hey, you know I sat down with this and I felt into this, and there's something that I want to share with you. And also, thank you for just shining a light. Thank you for allowing for this space for me to open even more to love.
Mhm.
And I think that's just all really beautiful things that coming back into that sisterhood wound can open us like deeper and deeper. Also, it just came to me that when we talk about other women, when we talk about, the feminine, we're talking about like a really deep part within ourselves that's literally the core of who we are. If you identify primarily as a woman, it's a part of us that's very alive and that wants to shine. And so the more we reclaim that with our sisters, the more we take space, our space in the world, the more we can remember our truth. And
Mhm.
the more we liberate ourselves, and it's just like so beautiful when we get to do that, not alone, because it can also feel really lonely, and we don't have to do it alone. And so, can we open to that? Can we keep opening and opening? And I think that's always the invitation.
Yes. Can we keep opening and opening? And I feel like you touched as well upon the liberation piece and the feminine, right? The feminine frequency is the all, is the everything, right? And
Mm,
the more you open and open and open into that liberation, that's where you walk the line of being accused of being too much, too
yes.
emotional, too sexual, the too much woman,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And we've both experienced this. We've experienced it with each other. We've experienced it with like others as well. And we have a lot of people in our audience who get triggered by the too muchness. I would
mhm.
love, because you'd mentioned it at the very beginning of our conversation, right? The too much. So what is your advice to those listening for, yeah, the women who have been made to feel like they're too much, like they are too expressed, like they are too in their body, they're too much.
Yes, I love that. And yes, like I feel like we both connect so much through this conversation, and we are always talking about this conversation. And it opened us even more the moment we started going deeper into exploring and connecting and really embodying our unique erotic expression, our sexuality. And so when we see a woman like dancing, like just being really expressed and being really free, like that's pure radiance. When we see a woman in her sexual power, connected to her hips, connected to her breasts, connected to her body in all shapes and forms, like that translates to radiance. And one of the biggest things about radiance, and radiance is connected with letting ourselves be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And letting ourselves be seen in our radiance feels fucking vulnerable. And that is, it's something that can feel really, really scary, not to mention that essentially you're dancing and you're seducing and you're befriending all the things that society has told you no, that's not okay. You're a slut. You should be ashamed. That's wrong. You need to fix
Mm-hmm.
yourself. You got a mental problem. Like, are you trying to get sex? Like, what it is that you're trying to say with that outfit or with that expression? And so these are things that we've learned since we were kids, and we're growing up with all these ideas, beliefs, and all this conditioning. And if we're not aware, then of course we see another woman in her radiance, and we're like, well, what the fuck? like why, what are you
Mm.
doing, girl? Like this is not okay.
Yeah. And almost like just to punctuate that, like when you see another woman in her radiance, often it's we go straight to judgment, but it's actually, ooh, I want to be in my radiance.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, no, yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I was gonna say, literally, that's something that we all have within ourselves. And so we're just seeing a mirror of things that are also live within ourselves, of things that are always pulsating within us, but we keep blocking them, we keep repressing them when we are in fear. And
Mm.
so what would it look like to again keep cultivating that trust, that space of being vulnerable when I do feel triggered? Like, what are the things that I need to keep cultivating so that I can be more free in my expression, so that I can be a more like true embodiment of who I'm here, who I came here to be on this earth, because we all have our own unique flavor. And that's another thing that we often forget when we are in this constant pursuit of the perfect idea of like what a sexy woman should look like or be like, or a woman that's worthy of success and love and abundance in the world. Like we obsess about like this picture that we've created in our minds about how this woman should look like and be and act and talk and express, and
Mhm.
we completely forgot about like what it is that it's this thing that I'm dying, that I'm craving to express in the world. And those are the things that we see in our sisters and we get really, really triggered by. So I think those are always all invitations for you to like, oh, okay, I just felt really triggered by what this woman is doing. Hmm, I wonder what's there. I wonder why, right? Like, is it really that I'm jealous? Or
Mm.
is it really that I just have a really deep desire to also unleash that part of myself?
Yeah. And that piece around not giving yourself permission to embody that, to claim that, to be in that radiance. And going back to that, the piece that you touched upon at the beginning around safety and creating that space of safety within and building upon that, that actually then makes you feel more okay, more safe to expand in that radiance. Because we've
Mm,
also learned as well, like, to hide our radiance, and not just with sisters, but with men too,
mm,
right? Because don't be in your radiance, don't express yourself in it, like, don't be in your body because you'll get unwanted male attention. And so I think a piece of this as well is really cultivating that inner masculine
mhm.
within that can discern between and how to handle like a situation, right? And I definitely know that it feels safer to be embodied in the radiance and the sexuality and all these pieces on the internet, ironically, because there's that wall, right? There's
Yeah.
that barrier.
Mm,
Whereas there are certain pieces when you're like in person where it can feel really scary. And it's when we come into the communities and we bring this radiance, as well as radiance is few and far between when you go into the real world, right? Like,
yeah.
we the real world, and I mean like normal life.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to witness that and to also cultivate these pieces within that enable you to not only see what's within you, but then also how to navigate without dimming your shine in a way that still maintains that safety.
Mm, yes, absolutely. I love that. And just like another piece about radiance is that a lot of times we block that radiance because we don't want to make others feel uncomfortable.
Mm,
And we've learned so much, like we've been judged before, we've been criticized before when we are in our radiance. And so then we just keep ourselves small. And what are we really gaining from keeping ourselves small? Like, nothing, right? All we want is to be able to take up space in this world. And the more we do that, the more it becomes a source of empowerment, right? Like the more confident we can feel in our relationships, the more in flow we can move through our lives. We can create from a deeper connection within ourselves, our lives, and everything that we do in our lives. Truly, even like speaking our truth, speaking our voice, speaking our boundaries, and actually honoring them, because a lot of times we can say, oh yeah, I have great boundaries, but I don't honor them. And sometimes those boundaries, we have to really bring them to the table with our sisters, with other
mm,
relationships, and also allowing ourselves to be okay with that when the other person is maybe not being okay with that.
yeah. Yeah. And I think the being okay with that when you're bringing anything, right? When you're stepping into more of your radiance, more of your embodiment, that actually learning and bringing it again back to that safety piece is be that safety within yourself to be radically responsible for how you are feeling, and to also know that whenever you enter or you bring something to anybody else, that you're not in a space of expectation for them
Mm,
to respond in a certain way, for it to be received in a certain way, because it may not be. It may not be
Mhm.
received in that way. And being okay with that is part of that unshakable energy, I feel like, that we're speaking into, with how to step into that radiance and how to take up space and actually claim being the too much woman in quotation marks, because you don't feel too much for yourself because you're no longer judging those pieces within you.
Yes, 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 yes. And you know what's one of the most beautiful things about our relationship, and something that I deeply cherish and that I pray in my meditations, like during the mornings, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that I have sisters that I get to celebrate myself with, that I get to brag about
Mm,
what's going well in my life. And I wanted to really talk about this celebration piece, my love,
yeah.
and also just like hear from you too, like really the way we celebrate ourselves, it's so beautiful. And our practice is something that I've brought into other of my relationships, where I'm like, you know what, babes, I feel like we should celebrate ourselves more. Like I think, like a lot of times my sister comes and then she's like, oh yeah, so this happened and it went really well, but also this other shit, like there's this other stuff that's going bad, and like I need to fix this and I need to do this and I need to work on this. And I'm like, all right, but also, can we go back to what's going well? Like, can we
Mhm.
go back about the fact that you showed up on Instagram yesterday on your motherfucking power, and you are looking like a queen in your fullest embodiment, and I want to celebrate you for that. And I just want to say that you inspire me so deeply, and also just thank you for being you, period.
Yes, I love this. And if there's anything, if you're listening and you can take away anything from this, is to consciously celebrate your sisters. And that's not a piece of bypassing, right? Like if somebody is feeling like, stuff's not going right, it's about highlighting, hey, like, you're fucking amazing. And I'm here to
Mm,
remind you of that. And I'm here to love the fuck out of you for your radiance, because it's this piece that you just presenced that actually empowers other women, whether it be clients, whether it be sisters, whether it be strangers on the internet who you haven't physically connected with or spoken to. Celebrating, and that ability to celebrate another woman and hold them in their highest light and be like, you are amazing, you are incredible, you have fucking got this, you are a queen, yes, 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 yes. And hold the space for what maybe isn't going right. Like, there have been a couple of times where, because we're on different cycles as well, like we're on opposing bleeds, like
yeah,
I'm full
yeah,
moon bleeding and you're new moon bleeding right
yes.
now. Yeah, so we tend to have swings. And so one thing I fucking love about us, this is just turning into a love fest for me and you, but I'm here for it. um
Me too. Aw.
is even if, like, if I'm bleeding and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like my world is falling apart, and then you've got something to celebrate, I'll still celebrate the fuck out of you and be with myself in whatever I'm moving through. And you don't dim yourself in your shining and your celebration. And you then also hold the space for me to be in my process. Like, it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship, and vice versa, right? Like, and
Mhm.
I love that polarity, because it just shows, as well as women, how we can hold, and not hold in terms of grasping, but how we have the capacity to be with it all if we
Mm,
desire to lean into it.
yes. Ah, that felt so powerful in my system. My God. And yeah, I truly love what you just said. Really, everyone tuning in, everyone listening, this piece of celebration is huge, 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 huge. And the first part to start, the first place to start, before anything, before celebrating anyone else in the world, celebrate yourself, right? Like, start cultivating that space of celebration within yourself. And also, like, what are some ways that you like to celebrate yourself with? like dancing, roses, chocolate, like in what shape or form do you like to be celebrated? And can you start doing that for yourself so that you can again open your heart and become an extension of that in your relationships. And it's truly such a beautiful alchemy that when we really we get into this habit of celebrating other women when they are in their power, when we find beauty and we see beauty in them in any form, it really um, serves as this magic that softens the shells around our hearts. And all of these shells have been just layers of protection that have been there because of everything that happened in the past, or any wounding, any past heartbreak, any conditioning that's still lingering in your body.
Mhm.
Those are the shells around our hearts. So the more we come into these spaces that open us deeper to love, the more we can dissolve those layers. And also being okay with, like, what if some layers are there because it's just a part of who I am, and I don't need to rush to dissolve it. I can just let it be, and if it wants to be there, can I hold it? And can I also extend this love to this part of myself?
Oh, I love that. I feel like that was a mic drop. It was a really soft, like feathery mic drop, though. It was just like a, ooh, like floating down, like a little hug. I freaking love this conversation, and I love you to death. Like, I'm so grateful that we entered each other's lives and that we get to have these conversations on a regular basis. And I'm so grateful as well that you said yes to bringing some of this medicine and some of this magic to Wild and Untamed.
Such an honor. Such an honor.
Yes. Is there anything, any final piece that you would like to share with anybody listening?
Mm.
If there was one piece of advice that you could give for the women listening to claim and to step into their too muchness, into their fullest expression, what would you say?
Oof. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is make love to your darkness. Make love to your darkness, because your darkness is what holds such a big portion of this kind of power, of this kind of, like, the too muchness, the wild woman within you, this the erotic nature that it's always pulsating within you. A big part of that lays in your darkness, the parts of you that you've been taught to reject and to shame and to neglect and to label as wrong and incorrect. Welcome them, like, make love to them and dance with them, party with them, get really intimate with them. And you'll see how the more you enter those spaces within yourself, the more liberated you become, the more you, like, less you give a fuck about what other things of, like, people say or think about you, because at the end of the day, like, this is your experience. This is your life. You are the creator. You are the manifester. You are the queen, the sovereign being of your life. Nobody else is. So I'll leave you with
Yes, make
that.
love to your darkness. Amen to that. Where can people find you, my love?
All right, my love. So everyone can find me in my Instagram page. That's my main page. It's Kayleen, Kayleen dot Mesa, Mesa. That's my last name. And you guys can find me there. Message me if you have any questions, if you want to learn more about anything. And I'm just so excited to keep bringing this medicine, to keep sharing this message, to keep shining bright and keep empowering and inspiring and inviting more women to join me, to join us, and to join this beautiful revolution of embodied, liberated women living the truth from their hearts.
This has been Wild and Untamed with me, Lara Raybone, and I look forward to joining you next time for more unapologetic expression of all the esoteric and beyond. Sending you so much love.